All right, so I'm going to stop right here because I want to let you know that before I move forward with this video, this was the very last footage I was able to shoot in the workspace before I left it. So I kind of was in a rush when I did it, so it was I usually have 2 cameras set up and I only had 1, so this next stretch of video is going to be pretty awkward, but I wanted to include it because I wanted to show you, well, as much as I can of what I was doing here, because I thought I had a great idea and it ended up not being a great idea. So and since I cover everything good and bad, I want to show you, I'll show you what I did. But, so yeah, anyway, there's not going to be a whole lot of diversity in this because I was only using 1 camera. Like I said, I mean, like literally after I was done shooting this day, I had to pack everything up. So, so anyway, disclaimer out of the way, and just letting you know from this point on, the rest of the project is going to be in no particular place because it's going to be just, you know, where I can get things done. So yeah, anyway, back to it. So, you know, as you know, I had to go with the second application of the Bondo, and I thought it would be a great idea to go with like a frosting piping bag kind of method, and I thought it was going to work great, and at first it did. But yeah, anyway, so what happened is and you'll see the fatal flaw to this idea here in a sec. So I put the primary compound in, and then I added the second compound, and then I was just, you know, kneading the bag. Like I said, you can't see anything, and I apologize for that, but just kind of kneaded the bag to get everything mixed. And when I finally got everything mixed, I started applying it, and unfortunately you can't see any of that either. I wish I'd have been a little bit smarter and checked to see where I was on the camera. So anyway, so I got it mixed, and you can see, I mean, and this is a time lapse, and you can see how much time there was between me mixing it and then cutting the end and getting to the start of it. And so the fatal flaw was that I had like a minute and a half to actually apply the Bondo before it started hardening. And so I think you do get to see it here in just a bit, the just the amount of Bondo that ended up being wasted. Fortunately, I didn't make a huge batch because I was just doing a second application. But yeah, I mean, look at, I think I set it down here in a bit. Oh, I guess I don't. But I mean, like half of what I made ended up solidifying before I could even use it. So I had to make more, and so I made it just the way that I did with the first application on my little red lid there. Obviously, it went a lot better this time. Yeah, I mean, you see how little I used. That was actually more, little bit more, I think it was a little bit more than I needed after what I got out of the plastic bag failure. But yeah, so you can continue to not see me apply it, and I do apologize for that, but at the end here I do make sure that you can see exactly what I applied. So that's not a big thing. But yeah, with all of the extra time, and the fact that I wasn't having to like position the piping bag, because that was the other thing too, is like I'd squeeze some out and then I'd have to like set it down so that I could pipe, and then so with this I can just I just had the can in one hand and the scraper in the other, and was able to get much more use out of the time for it. So but you know, I mean, I had to try. I figured it'd be a great idea, and you know, and honestly, if I had a better solution for mixing it, because that was the big problem, is that it took me so long to prep it that most of my time to use it was gone before I even got started. So, but yeah, anyway, here's what I applied to the second time. Like I said, mostly it was just in those divots, and you can see here I did not make the same mistake twice. I put it nice and thick over the areas that were going to need it the most. And now it's time to sand again. Okay, so we are back to sanding. So I basically did the exact same thing that I did the first time, except I was a little more light-handed. I didn't use as much pressure on the sander this time around because I didn't want to have to apply a third time. So, yeah, you can kind of see in front of the computer tower all of that that pixelization. It's not really pixelization. Well, it's a little bit of pixelization, but it's because of the powder that was shooting off. When I used the hand sander just right, the air blowing from the electric motor would catch the dust just right and send it shooting across there. Actually, I got dust all over the place, like a really, really fine coat all over. But nothing detrimental, but it's just kind of crazy exactly how far away from where I was working it got. Because you can see the little pile accumulating right underneath the can. Excuse me. But yeah, so I was a lot more methodical this time too, since I knew that all of the hard stuff was done. The little divots were basically full. I was just making sure that everything was nice and level. So as you can see, I just kind of worked on it a section at a time, and slowly moved my way around until it was finished. And then after each section, you can see I kind of was, shaking off the dust and making sure that I got a good view of it, and that it was, at least level to the eye before moving on to the next section. And yeah, not real exciting, unfortunately, but hey, it's the creative process. A lot of it is boring repetition. But, you kind of get used to it. And even though you're doing the same thing, like I'm doing it twice, depending on the process, you could be redoing it and redoing it and redoing it a number of times. But it's really cool because that with each one, you're making a little more progress towards what you're actually aiming for, in terms of you getting closer to that finished product that you want. And so, even though it's not the most exciting thing in the world, it's totally worth it to stick with it and see it through to the end, because, if you give up, it's never going to get finished. So I'm getting pretty close to done with the sander. I just have a little bit left to do there in terms of taking off the big stuff, because one thing I did know about Bondo before using it was that with, when it comes to the sanding and finishing of it, it's a process. And so I have, just like last time, it's 100 grit sandpaper on the sander. And so to take down all the peaks that I put, just kind of shellacking it on there, to get it mostly level, but then, to prep it for paint, obviously there's a process. You want to use less abrasive sandpapers. So, in 100 grit, it's abrasive, but it's not super abrasive. And so, I probably could have cut down this time if I'd have gone with like a 60 grit or something like that. But at the same time, the 100 grit was giving me a really nice balance between, getting it done quickly, but then getting it done not so quickly that I was going too far, or it wasn't leaving it too rough either. So it was a really, really nice balance. And so now that I'm done, you can see that I grabbed another type of sandpaper, and that is 300 grit. I could go finer than that, but I'm not, I'm not making a masterpiece here. I'm just, making a little warp pipe planter. So I figured jumping from the 100 to the 300 would be just fine, and actually it worked really well. By the time all was said and done, obviously I had my gloves on so I couldn't feel it, but it ended up nice and smooth. So I was pretty happy about that. So with that done, I move on to the topper, and we did the Bondo on the lid portion of it, so now I'm sanding and smoothing the outside. And it's not going to take you too long here to see that I kind of have a problem. And that problem is, we'll let it go a little bit further so you can see it, because the more I sand, the more visible it is. There is a ring, and I was hoping that it wasn't so bad that I would be able to sand it out, but it's just deep enough that I'd be sanding for weeks. Well, maybe not literal weeks, but I'd be sanding for a really long time in order to get it out. So moving forward, I am going to put something in that ring. It's really, really cold right now, so maybe on a warmer day, I will get out the Bondo and give her a whip around and sand it down real quick. But see, the more I'm sanding, the more visible it is. That ring towards the top of it is, it's just deep enough, and I know that there isn't going to be any amount of paint that's going to cover that up. So the rest of it, for the most part, turned out all right. It's not perfect, but I didn't go for perfect because I knew I was going to have to do something about that ring. Like, yeah, you can see where I keep putting my finger in it and testing it and see if I'm doing anything to it at all. And I just wasn't. The amount of work that would have gone into it is just unreasonable. So, I was kind of afraid that would happen, but I wasn't for sure. Like I said, I might have been able to sand it out. I'm using my coarse sand blocks, and that's, like I said, it's somewhere between 60 and 80 grit, somewhere around there. So it's pretty coarse, but it wasn't taking it off enough to fix it by any means. So I am going to be applying probably Bondo. I'll know for sure, like I said, I got to find a warm enough day that I can work outside a bit, because, like I said, this is my last episode that I got to do in the workspace before I moved out. So fortunately, it won't take very long. I'm basically, just kind of slack it around, make sure it's nice in that ring, really, really good, and then sand it off. Maybe a grand total of an hour's work, give or take on the Bondo actually drying. But yeah, so anyway, so I did go ahead and finish off sanding it and make sure that the rest of it was, smooth-ish. I didn't want it to be perfectly smooth, like I didn't use a finer sandpaper. And so yeah, next will be even yet still more Bondo.